So without further ado, now after our wonderful welcome speaker, I'm now shifting to our keynote speaker, Dr. Thomas Fu, head of Mission Capable Persistent and Survivable Naval Platforms Department of Office of Naval Research. Dr. Fu oversees a broad range of science and technology programs for Navy and the Marine Corps platforms and undersea weapons, and with an annual budget of over $500 million per year. And without further ado, take it away.
I'm good. Thank you. Anyway, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for attending. This will be a little bit of a broad swath because folks probably aren't, well, some of you are familiar with Office of Naval Research, some probably not. Some probably will be, again, based on the topic of translating science into solutions for BlueTech. This is, that is what the Office of Naval Research does. Am I forwarding? We know. I guess I can check. So open it. Okay. Then I can just tab through. Okay. Anyway, let's just get on with it. So this is preaching to the choir, obviously, right? So you're BlueTech, you're focused on the oceans, you're focused on water quality, you're focused on water safety, where it scripts. It is this piece, but I think it's sort of can't say it enough how much the world depends on the oceans, right? That's whether it's weather, whether it's the technology, whether it's communication, right? People sort of lose track that 99% of the intercontinental communication is through undersea cables, right? So we're thinking that it's cool and it's satellites and all. It's undersea cables, right? So it's and that's kind of the driver. But again, so we're a water world. BlueTech's important because of that, and we're really driving all that as part of this week of what that means. But I bring it back all the time. We are a changing world, and if we haven't seen that over the past few years, you were not paying attention, right? So it's a changing world, whether it's just seasonal change, it's a changing world because of climate change, it's a changing world just because of everything else. But one of the things that people lose track of, and maybe folks that have been in the area for a while doing research for 30 plus years, is Doug and I have commiserated. It's changed, right? It used to be that the government was the largest federal, funding agency for source of R&D dollars. Well, you can look at it, and this is FY17, 108 billion in R&D from corporations. Department of the Navy budget 2.4 back then. I think it's close to 2.7 now. So you could argue that's not even inflation, NSF, but that's really what's happened, right? So you really are looking at it as a different world where it is going to be a startup commercialized world, but is that sufficient? Is that how it's going? And so that's why it is more and more important. The connect, influence, accelerate this. You have to speak to each other. You've got to connect. It's going to be a different kind of world that we operate in. And for the Navy and Marine Corps, that's the same function that you're seeing. We'll talk about it. So the S&T R&D ecosystem, the research ecosystem, the technology development has fundamentally changed. But then there's other change, right? So there's Fukushima, there's Santa Rosa forest fires, there's 9/11, all those major changes to how we function, worked, dealt with things. And those changes are, just come out of nowhere. I don't think anybody was predicting them, though you could say forest fires, maybe that's something we should be paying attention to. But it functionally changed how the world worked. And then you said, okay, even more so right now in our last few years, right? COVID came along, January 6th came along, the Black Lives Matter. It actually changed how the world works and operates. We think of the world differently because of those. Again, those are somewhat external to our day-to-day world, I would say, our day-to-day operations, how we do things. But it's the change comes even when it is within our own realm. So interim national security strategic guidance, that is the strategic guidance that as part of the Department of the Navy that we're handed. That's the 2021 document. just this year, 2022 became the real national defense strategy, not the interim one. But if you look at the interim strategy, it does say a dynamic, inclusive, innovative national economy. It does say equitable, clean, and resilient energy future. It does say that we'll deal with existential risk posed by climate, and we'll focus on sparking innovation, low to no carbon future. Those are all the things that this group should be focused on. It is fundamentally part of the nation's national defense strategy to start addressing those, because those are game changers. Then you look at, as you scroll down, if you're at Scripps, expand our science and technology workforce by investing in STEM education. Most of us that are cynical would say, okay, it's a sentence in a national defense strategy, and I'll make my PowerPoints just like this and say, hey, look, we're doing these things. No, we're talking about $100 million of ONR funding going to 6-1 research, basic research. It is not a trivial amount. Our current budget out of that 2.7 billion is about 600 million. We're talking about an increase of 100 million. NSF going up to 2 more billion, something like that. I think they're talking about 10 billion up from their 8 billion. So this is putting money where the strategy thinks it needs to go to look to the future. So this is S&T 6-1 dollars. This is grad students and postdocs. So this is looking towards the future. So here's the problem. This came out of Steve Blank's book a while ago up at Stanford in the innovation startup space. The problem is you've got to keep working faster and harder just to keep pace. And at the same time, you've got this, Darwin problem of the world's, as I just said, the world is changing. How do you keep pace? And it's not enough to keep pace. If you don't constantly adapt, evolve, and proliferate, you're not just doing that for an advantage. You have to do that to not get left behind. And so that's a different mindset for people to really think about. We'd like to think that we could come into our little lives, careers, companies, and do these things and have 30 years of evolution and the world will pass you by. And so how do you keep doing that in a world that's constantly changing? And so it's not enough to just say it's business as usual. It is a looking forward. And again, it's all the running you can do just to stay in place. So what's happening? So we're all very proud. We all studied technology and science, and we said we've done all these things. So this chart, which says here's a human social development index, which is a combination of a number of factors based on our health, social status, wealth, quality of life, and then there's population. Well, what you look at it is when you plot the two against each other, you see, wait, our human social development just tracks population growth. It's mostly because we have more people, so we do better, except for a few little bumps. And the major bump is really the steam engine, right? It's really the Industrial Revolution. You don't see a bump, even though we'd be very proud of, hey, computers and the internet and all this information age stuff. It's not really changing our quality of life. We're not that much. We all have our smartphones. We all sit in front of a computer and answer emails all day long. Has that actually made us more productive? The reality is the data says no, it hasn't, right? We spend more time, I have a friend, we kid about this. We spend more time trying to debate what colors to choose in PowerPoint than actually thinking about what's on our slide, right? That's the question. So steam engine made a bump in our quality of life. The rest of it, maybe not. So what is there that's going to make that bump? And again, we're at 8 billion people now. So you can look at it and say, okay, Moore's law, the computing piece. I argue all the time with the CFD folks out there that they haven't gotten any better. The computers have gotten a lot better. Their algorithms not much since I was in school and Numerical Recipes was published. But somewhere around 2045, there's more compute power in the world than there is brain power in the world. So what does that fundamentally mean? We're looking at an scientific AI ML world where, they can map protein, structure. They can map matrix multiplication algorithm. The AI is developing algorithms to do matrix multiplication that are more efficient than the human ones and more efficient than the brute force one. That matters. That's an AI figuring that out by just trying on its own. So something May happen. That's the theory, that eventually this compute power is going to mean something. What that is, we don't know. But that's kind of where things are headed. So that kind of change is coming, right? So there's a singularity, technology singularity that's coming. What happens? Then I bring this back to the Navy side, right? So you look down there and you say, hey, we keep aircraft carriers for 50 years plus. We keep, our submarine force for, even though they're designed for 30-ish, we keep them for 40-ish if we refuel them. Okay. Go back in time 30, 40, 50 years and imagine what your cars were like. Imagine if you had we didn't have personal computers 50 years ago sitting on our desks probably, right? But that's how the Navy operates, right? These are long-term investments, long-term platforms, right? So it's a different strategy. The question is that the right strategy? Maybe that's fundamentally going to change. But what does that mean? That's my job. Are we really going to keep Navy platforms that long? So you can go read the book, Second Machine Age, Three Conclusions. We're living in a time of astonishing progress. Digital technologies are changing how we work and how we live. It also asserts, so it's not a depressing book, that it is going to be profoundly beneficial, that it is better. It is better that I can Uber. It's better that I can, coordinate. We waste less time, right? But it's going to present some societal and cultural challenges. It is going to leave some people behind. We are seeing that now. Again, there's never been a better time to be the worker, the person with that skill set, the organization, the company that has that special skill set that can be applied to these problems. But there has never been a worse time because those digital tools will pass you by, right? They are doing things that have never been done before that most people can't do. And what does that mean for the industry? So this is it, right? This is Kennedy's quote from the convention back in 1960 about for space. But this is our digital energy climate frontier. This is a chance to actually define what that is. You can look at the agenda for the next couple days. You can look. These are the topics, but I'm saying it's not just the topics for the next couple days. You need to think beyond that. You better have the vision for where those pieces are going. Again, because it's not the strongest or the most intelligent that survives. It's the one who's most adaptable. So you better be paying attention to what that means. So the challenge, translating science into solutions. So there's San Diego and there's Florence. And you're going, why is Florence, Italy on here? Because a couple of years ago, there was a book written by Franz Johansson called The Medici Effect about Florence in the 14th and 15th century, where, again, the assertion is the Medicis were able to bring artists, scientists, poets, architects, theologians, and philosophers to Florence, and Florence flourished as a center for culture and advancement. That's what this opportunity is. That's what TMA provides you. You have a chance to connect with a broad range of areas, technologies. It's not just going to be, engineering and science. It's going to be broader than that. It's going to be societal. It's going to be business. It's going to be policy, right? But that's where you're going to get new ideas. That's where you're going to come through there. And again, it is the metaphor for bringing a diverse group together to go do these problems. Not the evolutionary, not your next step, but what is going to be the big win in this space. So it is how ONR is moving in that thing. It is a mindset. It is behaviors. It's really looking at the power of diversity and including a wide range of groups. That's how you succeed. It is going to be about information and performance and skills and leveraging everybody's specialized skills in that way. It is going to be what you see across the board. It is about experimentation, which is, trying things and learning fast and trying to do things in executable steps, not these giant, it's not going to be give me $20 million and I'll go start a new program. It's going to be learning as you go and evolving in time. That's that constant reframing. You're going to have to evolve and adapt, and you're going to have to dynamically allocate resources. People hate that. I'm a funding agency. I'm going to say, no. I'm going to give you a little chunk of money right now. And if it works, I'll give you the next chunk. I'm going to give you the chunk after that. But if it doesn't work, we're going to move on. Or again, there's students involved, the students will get funded, but the big projects have to keep changing and evolve to move things forward. And that's what you're going to see going forward. There are already things happening in that piece, right? Purdue University's put together a consortium of activities. They're really looking at how to grow the STEM workforce, and they're really challenging that STEM workforce to be a group for the future, right? They're really looking at how do you solve the big challenges of tomorrow. So not ONR 3-year grant challenges, full on, how are you going to solve the power and energy piece? How are you really going to go to zero emission, right? What is the renewable space we're going to play in? So there's a chance, right? And so those are the opportunities that are being funded, is place bets and go for the big wins. So why? Because it matters, right? So this is a slide I show at the end of most of my talks for the Navy, which we're the Office of Naval Research. I'm not fielding anything that's going to get out there in the next closest thing might be 5 years. Most of 6-1 basic applied research is 10, 20 years out there. It is babies, right? It's my grandson. He's 2.5. That's the stuff that's going to be fielded when he's 18, right? That's why it matters. It's the grad students, it's the postdocs, and it does matter because there are sailors and Marines out there right now, in harm's way. We've got to protect them. And so when you look at, hey, what is Scripps doing in the oceanography space for undersea, studies, even Eric's stuff that you mentioned, right? So I can say it. Eric's UUV is all funded originally by ONR under Terry Paluquis's Plus program, right? So those are ONR 6-1 activities that go onto these broader capabilities, right? That's where it matters. That's where it shows up. Again, people will say, I will say it all the time. What is that real product coming out of ONR? It's people. It's grad students and postdocs. It's PhDs. That's what happens. Why does it matter? Because again, this is about the future. This is about dreaming what the future is, and this is about creating it. And that's why the BlueTech space is so exciting. That'll take some questions.
Anybody with questions?
Does your program solely have what you sponsor have to have a military application?
So it depends. If you look in the basic and applied research side of the house, no, it doesn't. I mean, ultimately it does, but I would argue all oceanography, ultimately all METOC has a military application. In the more applied space, it is really up to the program officers to look at that. So for the startups really looking at things, there is not my department, but there is Naval X, which is an organization under ONR, which is really investing in startups, commercialization of those activities. Now, I will also be, and for the people that have heard me speak before, I will argue that whoever cracks the clean energy space, the real zero emission, there will be a huge economic, again, it's in one of the slides. Economic advantage is a huge national security advantage, right? So whoever cracks some of these questions about clean water, renewable energy, zero emission energy, there will be a huge economic advantage that immediately becomes a national security advantage. If you actually read, I pulled the slide, I think the ONR mandate is not about capability or military capability. It is really about there's a military advantage to having a strong S&T enterprise within the United States, and there's a huge national security advantage. It's not about specific activities. It is growing that ecosystem. Now, there's lots of people that will disagree with me now, but I'm like, that's what the congressional language says. And so what you got was, those are probably some reasonably smart people back in the day.
All right, let's do one more question.
What do you, I'm Scott Longer from Kongsberg. What do you see as some of the biggest impediments to some of these technological advances?
Short-sightedness. How about that? I live it every day now, right? I live in a world where I've got to propose annual budget. I've got to propose a budget for. I'm doing it right now for FY24. We just started FY23, and I'm laying in the arguments for FY25. That's all the Pentagon and the Congress cares about. But every investment I'm looking at is way beyond that, and so I just live in a world where those arguments are just disconnected, and that's hard. Sure.
Yeah.
I think with the Navy, okay. So again, if you look at, Navy's budget, 700 billion, something like that. ONR's budget 2.7, so it ends up being 1.7%. ONR is very much interested in what does all this compute power bring, right, to research technologies. There is a hard look at, what does that actually mean for decision making, and I think it's, you can already see pieces of it. So is the Navy worried about it? Is the Navy doing things about it? Yes. Again, when does it become integrated into everything we do? That's a long time. It's a different question.
I think we have time for one more if there's any other questions.
I have a big teaching voice, so I don't need microphone. Following up on the question about the biggest impediment to the technological advances, I wonder if you can comment on the biggest impediment to the diversification of the STEM, specifically the blue STEM workforce. I know that's a broad question. I apologize.
I would say it's the same, right? Actually, it's us. It's our own bias. It's our own beliefs. It's everything. We get in our way more than we'd like to acknowledge, right? So when I say that, the short-sightedness on the technology is the same short-sightedness on our ability to actually crack through that. We have way too many biases and beliefs that are just untrue, and we get in our way and we can't get around that for whatever reason. So I would say, it's, like it or not, we all have to look in the mirror and say, I'm not doing enough.